One. Ms. Wanda, second. Ms. Shirley, if you're in favor of this, please let it be known by the uplift of your hand. All right. Financial report. I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. We'll look at the financial report for June and see what's going on there, and let you ask any questions you might have or anything. If you have time to look at it, I know you can take that with you if you want to as well. We print it out so everything is visible for you. So let's go ahead and, if we can, just get a motion, and then we can talk about it. I need a motion for this to be our financial report. Anyone? Charlotte, need a second? I'll let Ms. Wanda do it this time. All right, any discussion on this? Is somebody keeping up with these minutes because no one's here to do it? Well, we're just at the financial report right now anyway. Okay, any questions on this?
The last way bill is rather large. A lot of that was due to the trip we used to. I've not received the portion from the Presbyterian Church yet. That should be coming. I hope.
Bible school on that one too?
I didn't look to see what all it's possibility could be.
I'm gonna back up and get some of these minutes. Who made the motion to enter into the meeting,
Charlotte,
and who seconded it?
Wanda. And I don't remember actually who did the one for the,
The old minutes or the minutes?
yeah.
Who,
Same people, I think.
And so that's where we are right now. We're at the financial report, so that would be the next thing.
okay.
All right, any discussion on here? Any other things you like to say about it? All right. If not, there's been a motion and a second, and there's apparently no more discussion, then we'll have a vote if you're in favor of this being your financial report for June of 2023. Let it be known by the uplift of your hand, and if you oppose, by like sign. All right. Old business. If you hadn't looked at the Family Life Center lights, you need to make a trip over there to do it. It's absolutely complete as night and day difference. I mean, it's very nice. It's like a football stadium. But so that's been done. We'll soon have the floor done as soon as Ms. Jeanette gets started with it. So that's old business that we've been talking about there. Still on hold for the floor back here, as far as I know. Nothing's come forward about that. But so, and Clint, I'm assuming that computer started working back there?
We've got to do some fine tuning, but so far it's doing what it needs to do.
Okay. I know we had mentioned that one time before. So I think that's all the old business. Any more old business you can think of? All right. We do have some new business. We have something from the deacons. So at this time, if you would.
I left my notes at the house, and I don't remember what's on them.
I remember pretty much. Before I do that, any other new business?
Well, I don't know if Lito talked to y'all about this, but I think he had to replace the plug, that plug in the warmer. Okay. And I just wanted, I don't.
He did say he put in a heavier plug. The plug that burned up was a 50 amp. He put in a 20. So hopefully that's going to help the situation with that plug overheating.
Or was there anything else before I do mine? Okay. All right. Josh, would you mind going back to one of these back rooms for just a minute, I'd appreciate it.
I think we just all raise our hands.
All right. Y'all keep me on the right path those of you who are in here. The deacons were talking about how we could, Josh and his family's moving to Fort Worth. They're leaving this weekend. He's been called to the ministry, and he's going to continue his education there at Southwestern Seminary in Fort Worth. And, that's a good thing, because when God calls a person out of a church, it means the church has some health in it. It's healthy for that to happen. It doesn't happen a lot. So we want to know how we could help them. I mean, as a church, what could we do to help them as they move and leave everyone here and go to another place? So we talked about he was going to put out $2,500 for that, and that's per semester. So the deacons met Sunday night and they were in agreement. So it doesn't need a second for this meeting to give him half of that $1,200. So what we want to do tonight is bring it before you and have you vote on it, that we give him and his family $1,200 so they may be able to go to seminary. $1,250. $1,250.
Each semester, or is this just a one-time thing, or what?
What,
One time only deal right now.
right now it's one time. But we'll keep in touch with them and see, because churches do that for people that leave out. So the motion is that we give him this $1,250, and we don't really need a second because it's from the deacons. So any discussion on this? Plus, we got a card for him here we're going to give him before he leaves, and we got some gifts here, and we're going to have a special prayer for him tonight. So that'll be after the sermon. So if we could put that online so his wife can be a part of that, that would be a great thing as well. But the vote is $1,250. If you have any discussion, anybody, if you're in favor of this being a gift from our church for right now, one time, lift your hand, please. Opposed by like sign. All right. It'll pass. So, Sarah, would you mind go telling him to come back? Or somebody.
While he's coming back, I'm still behind on my minutes here. The lights in the FLC were finished.
They're finished.
All right, what about the floors?
She hasn't started that yet, but she's going to. It's up to whenever she can.
Just as soon as I call her and tell her to schedule a date.
We're waiting on the lights to get done.
All right, and the security cameras are up and running.
They're up and running. That hasn't changed. They haven't added any more to that, and the computer's working.
And then on the new business, last time, there was a possibility that the main computer and the broadcast and live streams will have to be replaced.
But it doesn't have to right now. All right. Any other new business? Motion to adjourn, second? If you're in favor, say amen. All right. We'll sing.
Come, Christians, join to sing, page 231. We'll sing the first and the last, first and third, 231. Come, Christians, join to sing, hallelujah, amen. Loud praise to Christ our King, hallelujah, amen. Oh, with heart and voice, deep is And our last song is page 217. Oh, How I Love Jesus. We'll sing the first, second, and fourth. Page 217. There is a name I love to hear, I love to hear. It sounds like music in my ear, the sweetest name on earth. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Because he first loved me. It tells of our Savior's love, who died to set me free. It tells me of his precious blood, the sinner's perfect plea. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus, because he first loved me. It tells of one whose loving heart can free my deepest woe, who in his sorrow bears a part that none can bear below. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus, because he first loved me.
Thank you. And he did love us. He does love us, even when we're not what we ought to be. That's a wonderful thing about the Savior. Genesis 13, as we continue the life of the father of our faith, we saw last chapter that his faith faltered. He told a lie. He lied to the Pharaoh in Egypt. He was in a place he shouldn't have been anyway. But famine came into the land, and he was where God wanted him to be, but when famine came, he left. He took matters in his own hands, and he went down to Egypt. And Egypt is always down in the Bible. It's considered a worldly symbol of the world. And he went down, and he left where God said. He took matters in his own hands. He moved everything. And he went there and he got in trouble because he told a lie about Sarah, said that was his sister. And then he got in trouble, and the Pharaoh threw him out, which is, now you understand, he could have easily took his life for that. God was working in that too, because that was a situation there that he could have really got in trouble. You didn't mess with the Pharaoh back in those days. So he was told to leave, and he left and took everything with him. He gave him a lot of things to take with him. We saw in chapter 12. Now we get into 13, we see he goes out of Egypt. I want you to notice one thing. There's another character here today, Lot. Lot was a lot of Abraham's trouble. And in this situation, we see that, watch as we read this, the wisdom of Abraham and the worldliness of Lot. Another thing to look at is Abraham built an altar. You don't see Lot building one. But the surprising thing is he didn't build one when he was in Egypt. He went down. And in the Bible, going down is a bad thing. Jonah went down. He went down in the boat, down in the water, down in the fish. When they start going down, and when we start going down, when we start taking matters in our own hands and rebellious, we too may end up in some trouble. But God still loves us, and he still works in situations. See, in this story, we see where he begins a new beginning. After stumbling and falling and faltering in his faith, we need to understand that the Lord's grace is sufficient. That's what he told Paul. My grace is sufficient for you. And when matters happen that we don't like, we jump and we take it in our own hands. We don't think God's working fast enough, and we want to help him out or do it on our own, and then ask him to help us get us out of trouble that we get in. But here we see in verse 13, verse 1, as we begin, he's on the road again. And an altar, A-L-T-A-R, will alter, A-L-T-E-R, many a family if they would just do it. Have an altar, a time of altar. And this is what happens with Abraham. So we begin reading here in chapter 13, and we see here, and Abram went out of Egypt. Verse 1. He went out of Egypt. He left Egypt. It was no better for him being there than it was when he went in. He left it in a mess. He lost his testimony. He lost favor. He didn't shine any light in a dark place when he could have. But now he's going out. It was a disaster. It was a disaster that he went there, and all of it, the way it worked out. He went down. He went out of Egypt now. He and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle and silver and in gold. He's very wealthy for that time, that era and time in history. He went on his journeys from the south even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning. He went back to where it all started. And look what he did. Between Bethel and Hai, unto the place of the altar. Catch that. And there, which he had made there at the first, and there Abram called on the name of the Lord. He went back to the altar. It's an upward move when he leaves Egypt. He takes steps to get back where he's supposed to be. So we see the first thing here is a remove. He removed himself from Egypt. He left it. There has to be a separation between the world and God's people. He moved away from it. His possessions, he left nothing to Egypt, nothing they could use for their evil. He took his family, all of his possessions, his resources, he left nothing there. And then we see there's another thing here, his return. He went back to where it all started. Now, maybe we need to do that sometimes. Let me show you why. Was there a time when your life was closer to God? Was there a time when you were studying the Word more? Was there a time when you were more excited about church? Was there a time when you were witnessing more and sharing the gospel? Was there a time when God was closer to you than you are right now? Do you remember what made it that way? We need to go back to that. Maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, a month ago, a few weeks ago, you were closer to God than you are now. What was you doing different? And go back. Go back to that place. Go back to an altar there. How was it years ago, months ago, weeks? What were you doing different? Go back. What he did was he returned, he repented, and he repeated. Maybe we were singing louder. We wanted to sing. We were witnessing. There was a fire. You were excited. God was your number one in your life. You were excited. And now other things is crowded out. You know, Jesus told them in Revelation, the church of Ephesus, to remember where you were, to go back to that, to remember. because the Lord's where we left him. We're the ones that left. He told him to go back to that time. In Revelation 2:5, he told the church there, they had strayed their passion apparently. And he said, remember therefore from whence thou art fallen, and repent and do the first works. That's what Abraham did. There's no record of him putting a tent up or an altar in Egypt in any place at all. But here we see that's what he did, where it all started. Jacob went back to Bethel. There's a time where we have to get it back, where it all began, where he had previously was close to God, where he previously had got God's instructions to where he should have been. So he went back there. His dependence on God came back. So there's a removing. He removed himself from the world. Repent. Return. Start over again. That's what he did. He returned. But then there's a situation that happens here. There's a rivalry. 7 through 10. Well, let me read 5 and 6 because it tells, I told you up here in this verse that he had all that, rich in cattle and silver and gold. He's very wealthy. Well, so is Lot. And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents, and the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. Large flocks. It's fixing to be a problem. They had too much to work together in an area. So there's going to be a rivalry. And Abraham, look at his wisdom here in verse 7 and 8. And there was a strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled there in the land, and Abram said unto Lot. Now see, that's the enemies. The enemies could have seen that they were not together and made an attack or come at them because there was feuding. See, the world watches the church, and they know when we're not together. They love it when church trouble happens. Oh, you can hear them talking about, that church got trouble now. The world loves it when we as Christians stumble. They love it. And this is what happens here. I mean, they're not sad about it. What do we expect the world to do? But they enjoy it because, we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to always be together and have halos on our head and do everything right. So when that happens, they begin to have problems with it. See, they gained immense wealth, and there's the problem here. Each wanted better grazing places for their flocks and their herds. And it just wasn't going to work. And Abraham caught on to that because there's a conflict coming. See, a person's true character is always going to come out in a conflict. That's how you know what they're made of more than anything else. It'll be revealed then. So he makes a proposal. There's a problem, and he makes a proposal here. In verse 8, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thy herd and thee, and between my herdsman and thy herdman, for we be brethren. A church has got no business fighting each other. We be brethren. A church has got no business in a quarrel. Like these herdsmen, when a conflict, the world is always watching. They always know. They can walk in here and visit a church, any church, and tell you if there's a quarrel going on. It's just something you can't hide. And he's saying, we're brethren. We respect and love each other a lot. He's reasoning with him. He's trying to keep this from getting out of hand. He wants peace between the family. Let me say this, there is nothing so important as to destroy a church. Nothing. No way, not having your way, nothing is worth destroying a church and by its people. Nothing. Because it never recovers. And you can be on a corner of a town and doing good for every year after year after year, but you have one trouble, the world will never forget it. They'll never come. They'll never get over it. A preacher, as I said a few weeks ago, can have 16 glorious years of leading the church, but let him do one thing wrong, and that's what he's remembered for the rest of his time. All the others forgotten about. That's how people think. That's how we are. And I'm telling you, I know churches today, I've served some of them, that are just about down to nothing because of conflict. And I'm telling you, rivalries will run, and Abraham was wise to catch on to this. He says the heathen are watching, and they are. They'll evaluate God by how we are. They'll evaluate what we believe by how we are. You see, when the world sees church fights, it takes a long time to restore it back to where it was. We have to do all we can always to work out problems. But then there's the last point, and this is the regret in this whole verse. It starts at verse 9. It's not the whole land before thee. Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me, if thou wilt. Take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if you depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. Look at the dignity this man has. You pick first. Wherever you want to go, I'll go the opposite direction. Take your pick. You go right, I'll go left. If you want right, then, if you want left, I'll go right. He doesn't mention the fact that he's the leader and didn't have to do that. He gives him first pick. Now look at verse 10. Here's where it all starts. This is where Sodom and Gomorrah starts, right here. And Lot lifted up his eyes, but not to heaven, and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered. Everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, it was. And it's never been that way. Even today, it's not. After that, it still is not that way, ever. Hadn't been that way. Even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. Look at his worldly desires. He looked up. That's a better place over there. He's not using wisdom, he's using worldliness. Sodom is a city of sin. And he gets right up there next to it. He ends up being there, even taking a position there, and we'll get to that. He loses his family over this decision. He loses his wife. If it hadn't been for Abraham, he would have, he might would have stayed there if it hadn't been for the warnings, and God was so gracious to give him warnings and get him out of there. Then Lot chose all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves in the one from the other. Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked, and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. He made a wrong decision. He made a decision to go close to the, and you know, when we get to that section, you'll see there's not any indication that Lot did anything good for the people of Sodom when he could have. He got right up in there with them. He was important. He was living right in there with them in that situation. And God destroyed Sodom. And he lost his family. In verse 10, he looked towards Sodom. In verse 12, he put his tent towards Sodom. In chapter 19, we'll see he becomes a leader in Sodom. He chose the plain of Jordan. He made a series of wrong decisions based on his own worldly reasoning. Lot left Ur, but he became entrenched in Sodom. See, there's a lot of people they say yes to heaven, but they don't say no to the world either. They're still living in both. They're putting that tent right up against Sodom in their life. See, we see him. He had worldly wisdom, and Abraham had wisdom, and Lot was worldly. He lifted up his eyes, but not to God. He never built an altar. Abram did. We must be altar builders. He made a wrong decision where he put his tent. Wicked sinners were there, and he lost his testimony, his family. But see, this is what the world says. It's my way, my wants, what I want. Luscious green meadows. Oh, forget about all the other stuff. That's what I want. You know what? We live in a world that's more entitled than it's ever been. And Christians are some of the most entitled people. They think because they come to church and sing a few songs, read a few verses, give a little money in the offering plate, that they are entitled by God to get anything they want. That's the problem with prosperity gospel right there. Let me tell you, that's exactly what prosperity gospel is teaching, that we ought to be able to get what we want for God by just telling him we ought to get it. You want a car? Tell God you want a car. Give me money and you'll get a car. That's entitlement. It's in the church as bad as it is anywhere else. And prosperity gospel is ruining people because it makes them enabled. That we're the guys that I beck and call. That you just tell God what you want, and He's entitled to give it to you because you gave money, because you did this. Let me say this to you. If God never does anything else for you or me, He gave us Jesus, and that's all He needs to do right there. If He never does anything else for you or me ever, if He never answers another prayer, never does anything else, He's done more than He needed to do already. And the Lord, but now we go back to Abram here. And the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, lift up now thine eyes and look from the place where thou art northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, to thy seed forever, and I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth. Then shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it and in the breadth of it, for I will give it to thee. Then Abram removed his tent and came up and dwelt in the plain of Mary, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. Mamre means fatness, and Hebron means communion. See, I want to say that God is not really interested in our comfort. He's interested in our holiness. He's not really interested in us having things that we want. He's interested in our walk with Him each day, which may not involve things at all. So we'll do that. That's where we'll stop tonight. But we got something we need to do before we dismiss. First of all, let me just tell you who will be your preacher Sunday. The fellow's name is Harry O. Brown. He was at Ringo. He was my successor, followed me into Ringo after I left. And now he's at Camp Harris. He's the Camp Harris manager. He was available. He's right here close by. And he was an easier one to get than a lot of them. He'll be here both services Sunday. Harry O. Brown, his wife's name is Brooke. And I think they have 2 children. Well, they have more than that, but I think just 2 of them will probably be with them. But he'll be here both services. Give him your respect and listen to what he has to say. He will be filling in both services. Harry O. Brown, he's the Camp Harris manager. He spent about 8 years at First Baptist Ringo after I left there. So he'll be here both services Sunday. We'll be back Thursday, week from tomorrow, Lord willing, and nothing happens. We don't get stranded or whatever. So anyway, that's the plan. Y'all be safe and be careful. And Chris will be back next Tuesday. So he'll be here Wednesday night, but he'll be doing youth. Wednesday night, I was going to ask Ralph if he would do it.
I'm on vacation.
You're going to be on vacation? I may have to get Chris to do it, but we'll figure it out. There'll be somebody here. I promise. I wouldn't leave you without nobody. I'm just not going to do that. There'll be somebody here. All right. Josh, would you come here for a minute, please, sir?